Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus. Today's show is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico, see all the ways that you could save. My name is Daniel Dopp, here with my two best friends, Mike Clay and Field Yates, like we do every Wednesday, breaking down our Week 9 rankings conversation. Guys, last night was Halloween. Mike, do you have any fun stories from doing Halloween stuff?
Nope.
All
we
right.
got all the kids together and went around the neighborhood, trick-or-treated at all the houses, and end of story.
That was it.
That wasn't
was
funny?
it.
Or fun to you?
Oh, it was super fun. Yeah,
Oh,
we had a
okay,
time.
good.
Yeah, we
Okay,
had a good time.
nice.
Just nothing out of the ordinary.
It was a fairly normal
just
Halloween.
worked our way around, had a good time.
Nice.
What about you,
Just
Field?
a wholesome Halloween.
We are at wholesome and cute phase with our kids for Halloween. We our kids stayed up later than they normally do. I mean, one of them's 4 months old, so she goes to bed kind of whenever she feels like it. The other one's almost 2, and she's usually down for bed by 7 o'clock. We pushed it to almost 8 o'clock last night because she was having so much fun. My favorite thing, though, from last night was we taught her how to trick or treat. But instead, when she went and knocked on someone's door, she would go, tick-a-teet.
Stop.
So that was pretty awesome right there. So we love that. So we did some tick-a-teating last night, which is awesome. And
What were they?
they were pirates, like me.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The whole family was pirates.
Family of pirates.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Okay. Well, my second daughter might actually be a pirate. We haven't quite figured it out. So we figured, we might as well endorse this endeavor that she might be taking on for the entirety of her life. I actually know someone whose sibling is a pirate. Okay,
Is that right?
They have adapted, they have taken on this lifestyle as a pirate. Yeah.
Did they have little Bobo jerseys? Captain Bobo jerseys?
We thought about that. Might be a next year thing.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right, fair enough.
So-
I don't know if they make sizes that little.
That's
yet.
amazing.
We're getting there.
They're probably a Bobo onesie somewhere. The Seahawks do play, and I believe both New York and New England next year. So start buying tickets for those games already.
Yeah, get them now while you can. We had a baby and an old lady.
Those are your
my-
kids'
yeah.
costumes?
Or
Oh,
a
okay.
baby and an old lady.
Well, you
by the way,
can just borrow mine if you want to take one of the babies.
By the way, baby, low-key great costume because it's kind of chilly.
Yeah.
And she just had
yeah.
a full-on thick onesie.
Yeah.
Genius.
Kind
Wow.
of chilly.
I
It
know.
was really chilly last night here in the Northeast doing trick-or-treating.
Honestly, if I didn't have a couple of Miller Lights in me last night, I would not have made it through because it was so cold. I needed that blanket.
We didn't go out and do our own trick-or-treating because Manny, my son, is 19, so
Yeah.
we stayed inside the house. So Rosie dressed up as an octopus, which was a lot of fun. Manny dressed up as the Statipillar from the fantasy show.
Really?
So
Did
we
you
put
just
that
borrow
on
the
and-
costume?
Yeah, we have the costume at home. Well, one of the costumes at home, so we put that on for.
So what did you go as?
I just got home at the time that people were coming through, so I was just me.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up. Last thing, and they'll talk about football here for a second. You learn a lot about the first person to show up at your house on Halloween. That 4:58 arrival for the first trick-or-treater
Oh,
last
yeah.
night hits different. You know what that kid wants? That kid wants to be great. That kid is going places in life.
That's right.
No waiting around. Nobody in life has gotten what they wanted by waiting for someone else to bring it to them. So if your kid was the first person out trick-or-treating last night, congratulations. That kid is probably going to have a scholarship to college one
That's right.
day. Might play in the NBA. I don't know. Might win a Nobel Peace Prize.
Here's why.
Be a professor somewhere.
He or she had already mapped it out, right? They have several
They were
neighborhoods to
planning.
get to. That's neighborhood 1.
Yes.
They have like 5, 6 more to go.
Correct. I think
you're
you
right.
learn a lot about the first kid that shows up at your house on Halloween.
I think you're right.
I really believe that. It's an important thing. So I may be new to this parenting thing, and my kids aren't old enough to go out there on their own yet. But when they are, I'm going to be encouraging them. 12:30, have a little lunch, hit the road.
Hit the road.
Get out there.
Get
Why
out
not?
there early.
I'm with
Is
you.
there some rule that prevents you from going out sooner than 5:30 p.m.?
You're going to be at that point. I mean, you're going to keep working your way up. You're going to be hiring an assistant at that point.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
you're hired. First
Correct.
person shows up at your door, hired.
There has to be an app that allows you to find out the densest neighborhoods in your community. We will be finding those dense neighborhoods. We are going to be a volume collecting candy family.
I'll say this too. If you're going to be a volume collecting candy family, one of the little kids that came by my house didn't have a normal receptacle. In fact, he brought his pillowcase and he was like, I always bring my pillowcase because it's bigger than everyone's bag. And that's a great way to think about it.
That is a great
You know what I'm
call
saying?
right there. That's hilarious.
Shout out to RG3. I'm going to read this tweet that he sent out a little earlier. Tonight, our family experiencing something like never before in my life. I've been to countless Hallelujah nights, which in case you've ever gone to church and don't do Halloween, they try to do like a church-themed Halloween thing, right? Seen people in costumes from Moses to Samson, been to college Halloween parties and seen some wild stuff. Been trick-or-treating as a kid with our parents and as a parent with our children, but we have never seen someone selling candy at their door for trick-or-treating to children's. Tonight, we saw just that. How is that possible? How is that possible that RG3 found someone that was selling candy to children for Halloween?
Like, did he like walk into a 7-Eleven or something?
I don't know. That seems like that's like absolutely outside the spirit of Halloween. I have no idea how that works.
That kid is like very entrepreneurial, right? Like one day that kid's going to be on Shark Tank and be like, all right, so listen to me.
You know what, that kid has a pillowcase full of candy. I promise you, he has more candy than everyone else in the neighborhood just going around selling to everybody.
Mr. Cuban and Mr. John and Mr. Wonderful. Let me talk to you for a second here. All right. I want to offer you 5% of my business for $50 million. Are you interested?
Mm-hmm. So he was giving out the little candies, but then had the big candy sitting here and said, well, if you want to upgrade, there's an upcharge. You got to throw $1 in the pot. You get to pick from the big bowl.
Well, I'll tell you what, we had a couple of teams that decided to upgrade at the trade deadline here.
Is that why that intro took so long? You were just waiting?
I was waiting.
Where's my moment? Where's my moment to strike?
Right there. All right.
You nailed it. Great job.
Let's talk about some trades here because we had the trade deadline last night.
Yep.
There was one big one that really was, I shouldn't say big one.
I know. I'm so glad you took that back.
It's like there was one like sort of little one that we talked about, but there's one that sort of fits with us in fantasy, and it's Joshua Dobbs getting traded from the Arizona Cardinals to the Minnesota Vikings. Cardinals giving up a 7th-round pick plus Josh Dobbs in order to get a 6th-round pick back. It's about as cheap of a deal as you can make in order to make sure that you have yourself a quarterback. Jaron Hall field has been the guy that we've been talking about that will fill in this week potentially for Kirk Cousins.
He will fill in this week. That was announced yesterday.
How do you feel about this Josh Dobbs moves to Minnesota?
First of all, I expect him to be the starter by week 10.
Okay.
So by next week, he'll have 10 or so days to get up to speed here. And I actually, first of all, like as somebody that does have Josh Dobbs in a very thin quarterback room in a 2-quarterback league, I'm very happy about Josh Dobbs. And by the way, this was sort of forecasted. It made very little sense that the Cardinals would bench Josh Dobbs in favor of Clayton Tune when Josh Dobbs had been, by all accounts, like completely solid for them, given the fact that they traded for him just before the start of the season. And I'll say this resuscitates a little bit of the quarterback value of a position that all of a sudden is hurting in a fairly dramatic way right now. So I think Dobbs ends up in a spot where he can be slightly better than what he was in Arizona for these obvious reasons. First of all, one of the top 5 rushing quarterbacks so far this season. So he's got value with his legs. That's going to help set a floor. But then this offense is extremely talented, right? I mean, going from Hollywood Brown and Trey McBride to eventually, well, hopefully, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and KJ Osborne, pretty reasonable offensive line play of late. That, to me, brings in the possibility that Josh Dobbs can once again be a streaming option once he is a starter in week 10 and beyond.
Yeah, I think the word that stuck out to me that you said was resuscitate, which is resuscitates the fantasy value perhaps of the skill guys in this offense, because that was the big concern. If Jaron Hall is the best they have going forward and he really struggles, which it was possible, they were going to have the 32nd best passing efficiency the rest of the season.
Yes.
It's at least a possibility. It still is, but now it's unlikely that it's going to be that bad. So that's what I feel like. Because, look, Dobbs was not great in Arizona by any means. He added some value with his legs. His efficiency was below average, fine, but it wasn't horrific. And it was enough that Marquise Brown was a good fantasy starter.
Yeah.
It was enough that they had the 4th most tight end targets, and Zach Ertz was actually hanging on the tight end 1 radar. Now, of course, we saw Trey McBride have the big game last week. So that makes me feel like there's a chance for Justin Jefferson to still be a good wide receiver 1. And in the meantime, Jordan Addison, maybe a wide receiver 2. And, of course, it's great for TJ Hawkinson because Dobbs loved throwing it to the tight end. And Hawkinson, there was some concern maybe the volume and efficiency would drop. So I think that's really the key for me is let's at least get a competent NFL quarterback in Minnesota, an extremely pass-heavy offense that can hold down the fort. One thing I'll say is the pass volume, it's going to drop. They're probably going to balance the offense a little bit more schematically, but also Dobbs runs the ball a lot. He's top 5 in all rushing categories, so he's going to run the ball a little more. He'll scramble more. That's going to take away some volume. But I think it's enough here. It's just enough that I feel like, okay, these guys, it's not going to be a full-blown implosion for this Minnesota offense.
Yeah. We're talking about the parallels between what the Vikings offense could look like to the Jets offense, right? I mean, how they dropped off so dramatically with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, and what I imagine the offense would have looked like with Aaron Rodgers under center. I get it was just 4 plays.
Oh, I know. I drafted a ton of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, so trust me, I'm with you.
But hopefully we have avoided, and not that Garrett Wilson is not usable, but I mean, you are really just banking on elite volume for Garrett Wilson to be usable in your lineup every single week. And when you've got multiple pass catchers in Minnesota, none of them are bound to see the kind of volume that Garrett Wilson is more prone to see in New York once Justin Jefferson is back, other than Jefferson himself.
Here's the thing, though. Garrett Wilson is seeing an absurd target share, right? Like a third of the targets. And he's like 28th in points per game with Rodgers. If he had that target share, he might be the number 1 scoring receiver right now. He'd be up there. I mean, Tyreek would be. I was going to say he'd be up there. He would be probably top 5.
Yeah,
so,
Tyreek.
I mean, that was huge. I mean, that was a just season changing move. And I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson knew it because Rodgers apologized to him right after it happened. Like everyone knew what happened there. So that's kind of devastating. But yeah, that could have happened here. Maybe it still will, but I think at least it'll be okay enough that you could feel good start.
I can't wait to have Joshua Dobbs be the second rushing touchdown for the Minnesota Vikings rather than all my Alexander Madison shares right now.
How about Joshua Dobbs' football journey over the past 12 months or so?
Seriously.
Like, so remember, he was in Detroit on the practice squad for like 30 seconds, right? Like he literally was in Detroit for so short, and he got the call to go to Tennessee so abruptly that his parents had to go to Detroit and pick up his car at the airport because he had left it in the garage there and drive it down to Nashville so we could start a game that week. Browns, Cardinals, Vikings, Lions, Titans, all within a year. And he's going to have a chance to like not just start for Minnesota, but maybe parlay this into a real contract this offseason. Good for him.
Yeah, he could start. He could end up starting every week. Well, no, he won't start this week.
Besides this week,
he might play every week of the season. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a first half disaster and he gets some second half run this week. But,
it wouldn't surprise me either. Yeah. I think Leonard Williams for the Seahawks is now on pace, assuming he plays this weekend, to be the first player to ever play 18 games in one NFL season.
Dude, how fun
That's the kind of like nerdy stat that maybe the three of us care about, but most of America is like, you guys are complete losers.
Look, I was into the defensive trait. I mean, that was the bigger story.
Oh, yeah.
The defensive side this year. Washington cleaning house. So I'm into that. That was good. And I feel like the Williams one just kind of flew under the radar. He's a superstar.
Yeah,
that guy's great.
He's an excellent player. I think it's just different at 29 versus, Montez Sweat and Chase Young at a much earlier stage of an earlier one contract prior to Leonard Williams, I suppose.
Yeah, and as an Eagles fan, I don't want to talk about the 49ers trade.
I did not feel good about that as a Lions fan either. They just keep getting stronger.
What a get. Anyway.
Detroit Lions did make a trade, though, actually, for Donovan Peoples-Jones coming over from the Cleveland Browns for a 6th-round pick.
I like it.
This is a better NFL move than it is a fantasy move.
Yeah, it was Marvin Jones' replacement. Yeah, Marvin Jones de facto retired, at least for now. We'll see if he comes back at some point. But they were looking for a replacement for him. Obviously, Jameson Williams hasn't been there yet, hasn't been a full-time player. So you sub out Jones, you sub in Peoples-Jones. I see.
Yeah, look
at
that.
Literally a Jones for Jones.
Yeah,
I get it. I get what they were doing.
Yeah.
I don't know that he's going to have fantasy value. I mean, we have seen Josh Reynolds' usage drop off, so maybe he ends up slotting in as the number 2 not in targets, but number 2 in terms of wide receiver volume. I don't know. It's going to be enough to be a flex starter, but you're right. Better NFL move. Oh, and by the way, do love it for Cleveland, though, because I want to see Cedric Tillman.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if he's a 3rd-round rookie. David Bell was a 3rd-rounder last year. They haven't really used those guys. I think part of it was just they had 3 guys on the field all the time. Tillman's been a healthy scratch, I think probably because he's not playing special teams. But wouldn't surprise me if he works his way up and is number 3, maybe eventually number 2 in targets at wide receiver. I like him as a prospect a ton. Can't wait to see him out there.
I just would like the Cleveland passing offense to be more functioning before I start talking about their 3rd wide receiver having anything in the way of fantasy value.
That was dynasty excitement because you're on all my teams and I like them a lot. So you don't have to add him yet.
So probably my biggest takeaway from this Donovan Peoples-Jones trade on the Detroit side, besides what Mike said, was, and credit to the great Dan Wetzel. I'm sure you guys have all read Dan a million times before. He's a legend of the game. He pointed out that DPJ went to high school 0.9 miles from Ford Field.
No way. I did
and
not know that.
And he posed the question, is that the closest that any player has gone to high school to the eventual NFL stadium he would call home?
I can't imagine there's another high school within a mile of a team stadium.
Yeah, where would that even be?
I have never been. It's something that I'm embarrassed to admit, to Lambeau Field, and but I have seen how like there are so many houses right around Lambeau Field where you just park in someone's backyard.
That is true.
Maybe there's a local high school there.
That's true.
Maybe Rob Domofsky's son goes to the high school right near Lambeau Field.
That's where you get a homeschooled kid right outside of it, and then they go and play in the NFL. I don't know
if that actually counts.
I don't know. Are there a lot of homeschooled NFL players?
You know something, Daniel? I know a lot of random crap that is absolutely irrelevant to most people. I do not know that.
Doesn't know, guys.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that one. Don't know that one. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are some, right?
I do think that for this move, and I don't know how this isn't going to mean a whole lot for us, but I do wonder if they're going to replace Jameson Williams' deep shots more with Donovan Peoples-Jones, because I think they need to see J-Mo. He's struggled. like just honestly, he struggled out of the gate, right, with everything. I wonder if they're trying to find ways to manufacture touches a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage rather than only making him catch 45-yard passes. That deep speed is obvious.
Yeah,
I want him to be able to have the ball in his hand and do some of that.
Yeah, that's what you want. You want 7 targets for Williams and a carry every game. Something
like
that.
I don't
Peoples-Jones, you need 3 targets.
Exactly.
You know, something like that, situational deep threat. But this is probably, his ceiling's probably like that MVS sort of category.
DPJ.
Yeah.
That's the role they want him for, I assume, you know, similar to Marvin Jones.
Agreed.
So.
All right, last 2, and these 2 already happened. I'm just going to mention it really quickly so we can say we talked about it. Chase Claypool going to Miami and Van Jefferson also going to Atlanta. So far, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement with either of these guys.
I was going to say, I'm not the projections guy here at ESPN, but if I had to do a projection for Chase Claypool in his first 2 games with the Dolphins, it'd be around 1 catch for like 13 yards. Yeah. That'd be my guess about how much.
2 targets so far, yeah.
Oh, so 1 catch, right?
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, 1 catch for 13 yards.
He had 2 targets last week. His first time he played.
And that was,
that shows you the situation in Atlanta, though. Van Jefferson is their clear number 2 already.
Yeah.
He is blown. Matt Collins is way down the depth chart. He's just blown away. Kadarius Hodge, those kind of guys. He's the 2, and he's not even. I mean, look, we're unsure if we should start Drake London.
I was going to say, we need to get.
Come on now.
We need to get Drake London and Kyle Pitts fantasy relevant before we start worrying about Van Jefferson and his standings in the wide receiver ranks this week.
Here's a question: do you think that Arthur Smith is the Atlanta or the Florida of coaches? Is that where fantasy players go to die?
Oh.
You know how like in America, like Florida is where, you know what I'm saying? Like this is, it feels like this is Atlanta just keeps on taking fantasy value from players.
Man, someone just retired and moved to Florida and is listening to this show and is like, Jesus, God.
That's
next podcast.
Yeah,
God,
they just
dark.
Retired. All right, let's move ahead and talk about some quarterback conversations because this is not going to be that much fun either, if we're going to be honest. So we had a couple of guys so far here in week 9 that we like Fields. You laid out yesterday on the show. You're like, I got a clear line that I'm drawing here in week 9 as a reminder.
Yep.
Lions and Jared Goff, 49ers and Brock Purdy, Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence, and the Broncos and Russell Wilson are all out on bye this week. So Field, when we talk about your top 8 at the quarterback position, tell us who you like this week and why it's so hard for you to draw a line after 8.
By the way, no, it's not hard for me to draw a line.
Why it's so easy for you to draw a line after 8.
I was going to say, I got through 8, and then I was like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, there was like nothing left.
Here are the 8, and I'm just going to read them in order in which they are ranked, and then I'll tell you the next players in my rankings, and you'll understand why I'm drawing it at 8.
All right, let's see if we
Josh
agree
Allen,
with this top 8.
Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert.
Yeah, okay.
Unless you have 2 of those players on your roster for some insane reason, assuming you have just one of them, you are starting that player this week, and you feel good about it.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, that's a good list. I mean, you're feeling good here. Like, man, it can't drop off much from here, can it?
It can't until it can. Here are the next quarterbacks in my rankings.
Okay.
CJ Stroud.
Okay.
Baker Mayfield.
Oh, no.
Sam Howell.
Oh, boy.
Gardner Minshew.
What?
Yep. Those are my quarterbacks 9 through 12 this week. Now, as we talk about those players, could or will any of them have a big week this week? Of course they could. And my guess is 2 or 3 of them might actually have a pretty reasonable fantasy week, 15 plus fantasy points. But just think about the confidence you have to have. The confidence you probably do have in CJ Stroud after last week being in this perfect spot against the Panthers. He was bad. Wasn't good. Baker Mayfield was good last week. Baker Mayfield also has enough of a sample size for us to know that he is not a sure thing in fantasy football.
Correct.
They play the Saints this week as well, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Who's that? Who does Stroud?
Tampa plays Houston.
I'm sorry, Tampa. I had that mixed up.
Houston plays Tampa,
Sam Howell was awesome last week. I don't exactly know what to make of the matchup against the Patriots, though, right?
Yeah, that makes me a little nervous, too. I'm thinking about streaming him, but at New England, it's just, you know,
he could be great. He has been, but also, like, the Patriots, they did not stop the Dolphins last week, but we've also seen the Patriots, like,
they're at home. It's in New England.
They were awesome against Josh Allen 2 weeks ago for 55 minutes of the game.
And you mentioned this yesterday, Field, where when I talked about Sam Howell being able to like Blake Bortles his way, part of that is because he was playing offenses that were scoring points, making them have to come back. That's not really the New England Patriots right now.
This might be a 24-21 game, right? And then Gardner Minshew, he's had moments this year, and like he carved the Browns up, which was completely unexpected. And then he's had games in which you think to yourself, like, yeah, he should ball out, and he does what CJ Stroud did last week. So I feel like there's 8. And then everybody beyond those 8, I'm sitting here thinking to myself,
yeah, and I'm with you. Those are pretty much all my top streaming options as well. The guys inside my top 12. I'm a little lower on Minshew just because he had that huge game and otherwise has not been good. I mean, last week he was QB 16. That was his next best finish of the season. He was
Wow.
outside the top 20
Wow.
every week until 2 weeks ago. So I don't feel as confident about him at Carolina. They allowed 2 big games to Tua and Goff, but otherwise no top 16 finishes this season. But I'll throw into the list here Jordan Love. Obviously, he has fallen off a bit since a good start to this season. But again, we're talking about the best of a bad situation here. He's an option. Matthew Stafford, his best weekly finish is 14th, so it's hard to get super excited for him.
Thank you.
As well. Also, he might not play in this one. We'll see if he's healthy enough to play. If not, Brett Rippon steps in. How about this one? You want a long shot, deep one, just matchup dependent?
No,
By the
I
way,
want
No,
a
give it to
solid-
me.
No,
Yes.
I want a solid
well,
starter.
No, I want it.
There are
Win
no
me some
solid
deal.
options. That's what we're saying. There's no solid.
Kind of yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a lottery ticket because of the matchup. It's
Will
not
Levis?
a guy you'd ever what?
Will Levis?
No. Well, he's probably next in our rank. He's
Okay.
like 15th.
Tom DeVito.
Mac Jones.
Oh, I knew it. I knew you were going to
And
say
here's
that.
why.
Yeah.
Washington has allowed 7 straight top 10s to quarterbacks.
Has it really?
7 straight.
Really?
Yeah, ever since week 1. So they've 7 straight quarterbacks to
Did
finish.
Washington just do anything to their defense that would make them be not as good?
That's a good call, my friend, because name one of their edge rushers currently on the roster.
I actually cannot right now.
Yeah.
No, we did talk about this before the show. Casey Toohill.
Oh, that's
AC
right.
Toohill,
That's
former
right.
Eagle.
Yes,
Former Eagle, yeah.
number
Yes.
one. And you know, first of all, like we all know that like the bad Mac Jones games are very poor for fantasy purposes. He's had, I can think of at least 2 games this year against Buffalo and Philadelphia
Yeah,
where he
week
was
one,
either
yeah.
at or above 20 fantasy points too. So
Yeah, Mac, yeah.
So
Week
it's
1
not
against
like,
Philly.
so we've seen a couple of instances where like the matchup kind of aligned. Not a terrible call. Obviously a very thin wide receiver room, but desperate times may call for desperate measures. Maybe a good daily fantasy play.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's just, again, at this point, you might be in a situation, especially in a deeper league, where you're looking at these guys, or maybe they're not even available, and you're looking at waivers and seeing bottom of the barrel guys. Mac Jones at home in this matchup, again, to your point, they just traded Chase
a
Young
bunch
and
of people
Montez
away.
Sweat, and who was
Their
it?
first round pick, Emmanuel Forbes, can't even play right now.
Yeah, he was benched. Who was it? I think it was last week. Was it Jonathan Allen? It was one of the DTs that was like, or Deron Payne. One of them was like, just, and
Allen was like, I'm sick of this
yeah.
bleep. Yeah.
And now they just traded the 2 edge rushers. I
Oh,
mean, morale
yeah,
can't
totally.
be great for that team trying to win games right now. So
How do you think the coaching staff feels? Like,
Yeah.
it's basically
Yeah.
like, all right,
Yeah.
so you guys are not going to be back next year. Just FYI.
Yeah.
Because we traded away all the players that, or not all the players. We
can't
traded away
believe it.
2 foundational pieces if we were going to like continue to see this one through and call this our core. But like 2 25 or 26 and under edge rushers who, Sweat's an awesome football player.
Yeah, they're
And
both
obviously
great,
Chase Young's very, very talented as
breakout
well.
year this year for him.
Yeah. So it's got to be an interesting week right now for the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, so what do you think, by the way? Put your GM hat on for a second. Washington traded Chase Young, second overall pick, for a 3rd round pick. Goes to the 49ers. They could re-sign him and have a superstar edge rusher for
I'd
a
be
long time.
stunned if they-
Or he could leave,
Yeah.
sign a big contract elsewhere. Someone will sign him.
I bet on
and get
that
a
part.
3rd round pick back,
Yeah.
compensatory. So
Correct.
they basically, it's pushed 1 year later.
Correct.
Is that Washington just wants that 3rd rounder 1 year earlier? What are they thinking there?
Yeah, I think that'd be my guess. Is that like teams would, so people that aren't as familiar with how the comp picks work, like if you lose a guy in free agency, and it also could be that they were projecting themselves to be busy this year. But basically, if in free agency you lose several more players than you sign, and the financial difference is significant, you are awarded more compensatory picks. So if you're going to be an active team in free agency, which maybe Washington forecasts, then having a bunch of players go out the door is not as impactful for compensatory pick purposes. But yeah, my guess is like more than anything else, it was get that 2024 3rd round pick locked in, because maybe, and I'm not necessarily saying this is a guarantee, but like maybe Chase Young doesn't ball out for the 49ers, and maybe he goes the Jadeveon Clowney route where he ends up signing a bunch of 1 year deals that are for good but not great money, and that compensatory pick is a 5th round pick as opposed to a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, Young has had injury issues. That's the reason he went for a 3 and Sweat went for a 2.
Yep.
But he really has been great this year. So it's going to be good for, I think it's a great deal for the Niners, a team trying to win the Super Bowl. Washington, it is a head scratcher that they move both guys.
They are. This is new ownership right here.
Yeah. How much? And I don't think the answer is probably none. I'm going to ask you anyways. I think this was as active as I've seen the NFL trade deadline at the actual trade deadline.
Back-to-back years.
Was there anything that ever moves like strength of schedule based on what you've seen from trades? Because you always put out a strength of schedule tweet and you talk about how this changes things. If the Commanders lost both of their young premier edge rushers, is this one of those things where it's like you look at it and it's like, well, this might be a defense that we're going to target?
Kind of already was, right?
I was just going to say, it's like they go from the worst in the league to
the XFL.
Now worse than the Broncos, like officially, like is that how it works?
I mean, the Broncos are good now all of a sudden.
I know. How did that work out?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So it's still, that's if it was like a mid-range matchup, now it'd be a little bit of a better matchup. But it's already a great one. To my point, they've already allowed
too many yards.
7 straight top 10. So that's maybe a long shot for you. Mac Jones. I don't know if he's under 20%. Probably
we
is.
can't do quarterbacks.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So, but there are actually a few interesting long shots this week that I'm looking forward to sifting through over the next couple of hours this afternoon and sending along my initial list. After Mike Clay almost cost me what would have been a massive egg on my face.
Week. Let's be clear.
Correct.
I saved
the narrative between those two stories is very close to being different, but yes.
Still I was feeling regret about halfway through the day, but by the end, never in doubt.
Never in doubt,
Never
baby.
in doubt.
All right, we're going to dive into our Week 9 rankings in just a second, but first, Field Yates is going to help us pay Mike Clay's salary.
Okay, Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
I love it.
Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage, plus add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is an easy choice. Switch today. See all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
Hey, college football fans and Mike Clay, I'm going to let you in a little secret that'll help you win game days this season. It's called Eckrich Smoked Sausage.
True.
You're probably asking yourself, could it really be that easy? Absolutely, yes it is. Eckrich Smoked Sausage is crafted with a perfect medley of spices for a truly rich, savory taste, Michael. They're delicious all by themselves or in any recipe that you can dream up, and I can see it in your eyes. If the word recipe sounds like a lot of work, don't worry, it's not. Visit Eckrich.com for dozens of simple, mouth-watering recipes, making your tailgating prep a stress-free event. So there you go. Eckrich Smoked Sausage is the secret to winning game days. You can thank me later. Visit Eckrich.com for more.
You're a rock star.
All right. We're going to keep this train moving on Fantasy Focus, talking about a bunch of rankings here for Week 9.
Yep.
Let's start at the running back position.
Boom.
This was mine that was offered up, and I will begin with Tony Pollard, who I have as RB15 this week, and I might be too high, yet I am 6 spots lower, than both you and Mike, Daniel.
Yeah, you are.
Over the past 4 weeks, how many fantasy points do you think Tony Pollard has?
How many weeks?
4 games. Call it 4.
Past 4 games?
4 games.
Say
32
points.
I don't know.
What was your number?
I said 48, 12 points a game.
That sounds
You said
right.
42?
30. I don't know. I was in the 30s.
Okay. 40.8. 10.2 fantasy points per game
Not
for
great.
Tony Pollard over his past 4 games. Moreover, what have we seen less of from Tony Pollard this year than prior years? Consistent passing game utilization, big plays, runs on the perimeter, efficiency, all the things that we thought would we were fearful of. If you were at all a Tony Pollard detractor during the preseason or during the offseason, have come to life this season so far. It has been a tough go for Tony Pollard of late. The volume's been fine, but the production has been bad. Now they play the Eagles on Sunday, and what do they do extremely well amongst many things, Mike?
Yeah, they're great. I mean, they've allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs. I will say this. They've had a really easy schedule against running backs.
I know, but dude, Raheem Mostert, who was the freaking second highest scoring running back in fantasy,
they
got
shut down.
stonewalled. Like
They did, but Brees had 20, Ramondre had 15. Otherwise,
okay,
it's Mostert
Brees
was
had
the best
20,
guy they faced.
which included 7 free points at the end of the game.
That's fair. That's
13
all right,
points.
that's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I'm just saying, are they an awesome run defense? Yes or no?
Yeah, I would
yes,
say
they
so,
are.
yeah.
I have him as RB15, and I feel like I am too high on Tony Pollard.
It doesn't feel great. Understanding everything that Field just said, the efficiency you haven't seen the same explosive plays, and even though you don't feel it, Mike, I agree with Field. This is a really elite run defense because of the fact that you've got 2 incredible guys, more than 2. You have a rotational defensive line that is just daunting for offensive lines to play against.
Yeah, so I'll make the case for why he's still in my top 10,
Okay.
which is heavy usage, right? 69% snap share, 15.5 carries, and 4.3 targets per game. That's really good usage. And there's been a lot of, again, we talked about this before, there's been a lot of games he hasn't played much in the fourth quarter. A lot of games, including last week. They had another blowout, and they were resting guys late. So there's that. 300-plus yard game still. So he's had a couple, 3 games where he's put up a lot of yardage. And also, he's had a lot of bad touchdown luck. His expected touchdown total is about 5.5. He's 2 touchdowns. Both were scored in week 1. So he's been unlucky there. So I feel like, you know me, I'm going to chase the volume this. Generally, these guys, if they continue to get the volume, which I expect him to. I mean, Rico Dowdle is their number 2. So I don't think that's changed. I think he'll continue to be a guy pushing for 20 touches a week. And also, there's probably a little bit of, and I'll admit, maybe this is one of my blind spots. I always like when a team like Dallas plays the Eagles, I'm just like, they just show up and the Eagles could be playing great. Dallas could be slumping a little and Dallas just puts up 34, you know, it just happens. And I felt like that when Miami came into town though a few weeks ago and it did not happen that way. So
this is my one of my favorite parts about Mike's analysis is that I have never met somebody who is so incisive and pragmatic and logical and just exactly how you should think about something when you have an even temperament than you. Like, you are outstanding at your job for a million reasons.
Thank you.
And then we talk about your Eagles. You get a little soft. You get a little scared. You get a little nervous. You're like, well, you know, like, have they really played anybody? And, you know, could the Cowboys show up on Sunday afternoon? They're playing in Philadelphia. You know, Dak Prescott always has his favorite pregame meals, a cheesesteak. Like, I'm a little nervous about this one. Come on, Mike. Come on.
I am. I'm totally guilty of that.
I know. It's great. I will board bet you guys if you'd like then.
For what it's worth, you had such a compelling argument that I did move Tony Pollard down in my rankings.
Okay. Does America see what's happening right now? Once again, me, Field Yates, overtaking Mike as most logical person and most persuasive ranker at ESPN. Boom. All right, so Daniel, you want to be not involved in this?
I'll take the middle. Yeah. I'll take the middle wherever you guys
are.
You get the 12.
It's not logical for me to. Right, what are we going to say? Top 12? I mean, allow us to go right to be top 12.
Well, then I'll give you top 13.
All right. Well, whatever. Fine. I'll 12 and a half. I know.
I know, right?
No, it's fine. Right. It's just I'm a long shot to win this, but I'll do it.
Okay, anyway, go for it then. Hey, you know what though? Every once in a while, you do win long shots, like I did this past week because of you via Trey McBride. So let's double this up.
I'm on a board bet hot streak as well.
You are. I know. You are cooking with grease recently.
I think in week 9, Tony Pollard will finish as a top 12 fantasy running back.
I think in week 9, Tony Pollard will not finish as a top 12 fantasy running back. Put it on the board.
Put it on the board.
And once again, as is customary, if he finishes exactly 12th, Daniel gets 5 board bet wins.
That's exactly how that works. I love being that person of the board bet.
It's great. There's no pressure at all.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start. No. So we always, Dave, our great producer, and puts the note together the night before the show. And obviously we update it if things happen in the morning. I'm just going to start going in when we have our rankings discussions and just find your ranks of a player and Mike's ranks of a player and just consistently splitting the difference.
Split the middle.
I just want to be Switzerland in every rankings conversation we have.
That's so good.
I don't even know what our board bets were last week.
We don't need to talk about it. Let's talk
Mike,
about
are you trying to gloat about your DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett win again?
No, that was the FF Now one. But I'm sure we did some on the show, right?
We did.
I feel like sometimes we remember them, sometimes we don't.
I will tell you what it is if you want to know.
Yeah, I do want to know. I totally don't remember.
We took a Christian Kirk board bet as to whether or not he was going to be top 20 or so. Because Field and I both were inside a certain point, and he was not top 20 given everything. So you would have won that.
So the hot streak continues.
We'll
keep it going with Tony Pollard.
When someone admits that they have like very little memory of a board bet,
I should just let it go.
Reverse it. Daniel and I were very skittish.
You were high on Kirk last week.
We were very skittish about Christian Kirk last week. Mike had him wide receiver 3. I don't know how he thought that.
I move on to the next week. Like once inactive start for the 4 p.m. games, I'm already on to next week.
Dude, it reminds me of my scouting and coaching days where like it literally be Sunday morning. We have like a primetime game and you're like, yeah, it must be awesome. You get all hyped up for a game on Sunday night. Then it's like your meeting as a coaching staff at like 8:30 on Sunday morning. You're like, all right, so we got the Raiders next week. Let's start working on them. It's like, meanwhile, you're playing, the Broncos that night.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, the Raiders, like, like the quarterback and doing this, running game, this, focus on that. You're just like, oh my God.
That's a lot.
Like by the time the NFL draft gets around, it's like area scouts are so focused on the next NFL draft. They're like, oh, wait.
Oh, I forgot.
What pick do we have again?
Yeah. That's so funny. All right, let's move ahead. Talk about another set of running backs here. We already mentioned Fields. You talked about Gardner Minshew in the streaming conversation.
Yes.
One of the reasons why I don't want to say out, but don't love Gardner Minshew as a streamer is in part because they're playing the Panthers. The Panthers do one thing. They give up a ton of fantasy points to running backs. And this week, they get both Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. Mike Clay, are we in a spot, especially with 4 teams on a bye, where both of these guys are still startable in fantasy?
I think they are. Great matchup. 4 teams on a bye. even last week with Moss limited, he still was productive. And I looked at the 3 games, not the first game Taylor came back because he played 10 snaps. Yep. I'm not going to count that one. But in the 3 games since, Taylor holds a slight edge in fantasy points, a slight edge in carries, in targets, and touches, big edge in yardage. He's been better there. They're in terms of fantasy points per game, Taylor is 14th, Moss is 18th.
Wow.
So they both been top 20. Now we have 4 teams on a bye. So, yeah, I have them both as top 20 options. I think Taylor is the preferred player. A great matchup against Carolina. To your point, second most fantasy points to running backs. Taylor is a strong mid-range, and we'll say mid-range RB1. And Moss is more of a borderline RB2, but he should certainly be in lineup.
Did you say that Moss is 18th in running back points per game?
Yes. Last 3 weeks.
Over the last, I was going to say.
Over the last 3 weeks.
Okay,
yes.
I missed that qualifier because he's 4th in total running back points this season, and he missed week 1.
Yeah, 7th in points per game on the season.
Yeah.
But
my analysis aligns with what you guys both just said. I've got Moss as running back 21. I have Taylor as RB7, just a couple of spots lower than you guys, because when you said, Daniel, when you introed them, you said, when we're discussing Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, my first thought was, should it be when we're discussing Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor?
I say it the wrong way.
Yeah, like me. Mike is shaking. He doesn't like that one at all.
Well, I just said, Taylor's ahead of him in every category except 2-to-1 touchdown at edge for Moss. That's it. That's the only area. But otherwise, snaps, carries, targets, fantasy points, yardage. It's all been Taylor
this week. Love it.
Yeah. What about the pass catchers? Obviously, we're starting Michael Pittman in this one because he's one of those guys, especially 4 teams on a bye. Mm-hmm. But Josh Downs, Field Yates, you have been on the Josh Downs bandwagon here. Is this a week where you would start him against the Carolina Panthers?
I have him. It's close. I've got him as wide receiver 30. So I'm highest amongst our rankers here. And so that's obviously in a 10-team league. That's a flex consideration. In a 12-team league, he's probably going to be a starter. Anything deeper than that, he's borderline a must start. And he's got 13-plus fantasy points in each of the past 4 games. All of the targets, it feels like, for the wide receivers in Indianapolis are going to him or Michael Pittman Jr. And because he's such a good slot receiver, like the difficulty that Gardner Minshew faces when throwing the ball to Josh Downs is fairly low. He's just a really good player too. Like I've mentioned how this Colts draft class could look like just a real keeper by the end of, or at least maybe even the beginning of next season, because of the promise of Anthony Richardson and the development of Josh Downs alone. Like those 2 guys look like the real deal here. And as somebody who in the war room, we play 2 wide receivers and 2 flex spots. It ends up oftentimes being that both your flexes are wide receivers. It's a 16-team league. And I don't know that this matters when the games actually begin, but going into the week, I kind of think to myself like, good thing I have Josh Downs and also Michael Pittman, as opposed to the other way around, right? Because Downs has been so consistent of late.
Yeah,
he really has. He's been consistent's the word, high floor. Yeah. That's what he's been, because he only has 2 weekly finishes better than 29th, 1 better than 18th. So it's generally been like just solid production. In a 16-teamer, that's great. In a 12-teamer, a deeper 12-teamer, that's good, good flex, maybe on the wide receiver 3 radar. So not a high ceiling, but he's a solid play.
I'm glad you more fantasy points in 4 straight games for Josh Downs.
I'm glad you mentioned the idea though, and that's a great stat there too, about like how, you're not going to get a ton of upside coming into the season. I think my analysis often fixates most on who are the players that can challenge to be a top 10 player at their position in a given week. Once the season begins, and a lot of the guys that we had high hopes for coming into the season either don't meet expectations or they meet them early and then come back down to earth, my appreciation for these solid players grows, right? Like in the beginning of the year, if you told me like, he might have 1 top 20 week this season, I wouldn't be saying to you like, bam, baby, Josh Downs, lottery ticket you got to have. Now that we're in it, and now that we've seen players that we thought were going to have monster seasons, not have monster seasons, or even guys that we thought could have solid seasons that are just kind of like, man, really? Like Josh Downs' appreciation has grown throughout the year. He's not the only player that fits into that category, but he's a pretty good example of the dynamic that I think I'm trying to get to.
I always write about, I have a section of the off-season playbook I do. It's like a long article that I do, like it's just a marathon of a piece, but I have a section in there where I write about that, which is there's always guys that fit that bill that people just seem boring, but they're always those high floor guys like Derek Mason and Jarvis Landry and Tyler Boyd for a while. Like there's always a laundry list of guys like that. This year, my favorite target in that category was Jacoby Myers, and he's at a higher ceiling than we could have imagined. Now, who knows what's going to happen going forward with that offense? We'll get to it. But you're right. There's always guys like that kind of stick out.
To your point, Field Yates, Josh Downs. over the last 4 weeks. Yes. Wide receiver 13, averaging 16.6 fantasy points per game. Guy that we thought was going to be good coming into the season, Davante Adams, over the last 4 weeks. Wide receiver 61, averaging.
Also on my War Room League team, by the way. So I should have said, maybe I should move Davante down to the flex spot for a little motivation here.
I got to tell you, this is exactly what I'm doing. Can I tell you? I'll just be honest about this. I got Davante Adams at wide receiver 20 right now.
Okay.
I understand.
Locker room
Davante Adams is a superstar. He is still a starter for me. But this is just as much about the idea that, this is not a Davante Adams thing to me. Davante Adams is fantastic. This offense has looked brutal. They obviously just fired Josh McDaniels. They have
their offensive coordinator.
And their offensive coordinator. The Raiders are promoting quarterbacks coach Bo Hardegree to the OC spot.
Still call plays, yeah.
Yep, so we'll see how that works out. But in a week, you can tell me otherwise. I don't know how this works in a week where you actually have coaching staff changes, what that does to the offensive game plan. But to me, I would simplify everything and just throw the ball to Davante Adams.
Okay, so good point. I would agree. And I would also imagine that when Mark Davis, who made this decision last night late, goes into the offices of the various coaches who are going to take on new roles right now, part of his directive is to get the most out of our best player. Or
period.
Whatever. Him and I think, probably
Josh Jacobs.
I was going to say Davante Adams and I think Max Crosby are the two clear-cut best players on this Raiders team.
Sure.
Get the most out of Davante Adams. They're already getting the most out of Max Crosby. And I thought about this, and I think some of this can be a little bit anecdotal. But I was just wondering, what happened last year to the Colts when they made an interim head coach change? And obviously they only won one game once Jeff Saturday became their coach. However, maybe this is just coincidence. Right after they made the head coaching change, Jonathan Taylor went back for liftoff for a 5-game stretch.
Sure
now,
did.
Some of that was perhaps tied to the fact that he was healthier, but remember, they benched Matt Ryan and then brought Matt Ryan back off the bench and made him the quarterback again. I think if I'm the Raiders this week, and it sounds like Aiden O'Connell could very well be starting in place of Jimmy Garoppolo, it's going to be, we're going to play the kid that, this is not looking towards the future. They may actually believe, and given how Jimmy Garoppolo has performed this season, Aiden O'Connell might actually give them a better chance to score over 20 points in a game for the first time this season. And they're going to say 17. Give him 17 targets a game. This guy's a freaking alien, and we can't get him involved for the past 4 weeks. So I'm hopeful.
As you're talking about this, just so that you know, it is official based on Rap Sheet and Mike Garofalo that Aiden O'Connell is going to get the start for the Las Vegas Raiders this week, as you're saying. You basically spoke it into existence.
I saw it. I'd seen Vince. I'm going to screw up his name. A local, who's excellent tight end. He had reported, I think, over the night last night that was going to be.
That was going to be the thing.
Yeah,
Well, it's official.
I will say this: I'm more optimistic about Adams for some of the reasons you laid out, which is it's Davante Adams. They're going to find a way to get him the football. Also, this last 4-game stretch, he has 142 yards. That's his lowest in a 4-game stretch since 2015, the end of the season. It's not going to be nearly that bad going forward. Obviously, he had better days after that.
Just tell me why. Tell me how you can tell me why.
Davante Adams, and these guys have slumps sometimes. It's not usually this bad, but sometimes it's bad. We've seen Stephon Diggs and Jamar Chase and Tyreek Hill, and these guys occasionally have these down stretches. Look, this one was so bad they fired their coach, offensive coordinator, GM, other running. Not running back.
That was Chicago.
That was Chicago. Yeah.
For different reasons.
Those are running together. And also, the Raiders are one of 2 teams. You can guess the other one that have not scored more than two touchdowns in a game this season.
Sorry, I used this. I credited you, but I used it yesterday on the
Jets,
show.
Yeah.
I'll bet you the Jets are the other one. Is that right?
Yeah.
How'd you know? That's amazing.
You might think it would be the Giants.
Not going to lie, by the way, I felt bad because I opened up, I guess Mike didn't watch yesterday's show. It was electric.
I just missed
It's our highest rated show on the comedy podcast chart so far this
Naturally,
year.
Yes.
But I mentioned we have to give the same energy to the Raiders that we do towards the Falcons in terms of misusing these incredible players on offense.
Yeah, I
was. You kind of feel bad that 12 hours later the head coach gets fired. So you're
I was thinking about that driving in. I'm just like, man, McDaniels was
That was
sitting there with
by the way.
Jacobs, Adams, Myers got good money.
Michael
Mayer they drafted in the second round.
Does Hunter Renfrow just stop being a good football player too?
That's another thing. He had 100 catches before McDaniels. I mean, just man, what? No excuse.
The lead into my talking points yesterday was I was driving on the way into work thinking about how the Raiders deserve the same energy.
Exactly what you were saying earlier. This is what we think about. We're just driving around.
Here's the deal, people. Mike was actually listening to the show yesterday.
I just stole everything.
And just wanted to play dumb for a second and just repurpose my thoughts.
That's what it is.
You are like all the football aggregators on Twitter who literally all they do all day is just wait for someone else to tweet something and then slap a picture on it, use a bunch of crazy fonts, like make it very salacious. Like it's like, hey, I'm just making this up here, right? Like the Saints released their third string running back and they're like, breaking picture, Saints waive Tony Jones Jr.
Yeah.
Once had 412 yards in a high school game, has averaged under 2.5 yards per carry. Please retweet for awareness.
They had 432 likes or something. I mean, it works for them, I guess. But
what a dumpster fire.
Yeah, with you. I like when they do it and they copy and paste and there was a misspelling in the.
Yeah, it's the best, right? And then they start arguing with each other.
Yeah,
that's even better.
That's so good.
We could do a whole episode on that one.
For what it's worth, I just want to say this. Man. I think Devontae Adams' better days are ahead. I agree with you. But right now, I am taking the Field Yates approach, ranking him as wide receiver 20 to motivate him this week.
Hey, by the way, speaking of quarterback changes.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's okay, so we'll talk about this, and then we have a couple. We're going to start to pick up the pace here.
Okay.
Taylor Heineke time in Atlanta.
Let's go.
Wow.
Yes.
Just announced by Arthur Smith. Taylor Heineke is the new Atlanta Falcons starting quarterback, guys.
All right.
So first, not personal. It's not personal, guys. Like Desmond Ridder, we're not happy to see you get benched, but we've only been talking about this since August. Like if Taylor Heineke was starting quarterback, we'd feel better about these players. Yes. I think the boost is like more a scotch than it is like, oh my God, Drake London, top 12 wide receiver.
They're still going to be the run heaviest offense in the NFL. Yeah.
But I feel more confident in general about each of the 3 stars in the Atlanta offense. Drake London, Jonnu Smith, and Kadarius Hodge. Yeah. No, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and also,
Yeah, he did throw 5 of his 20 throws to Van Jefferson and then a handful to other receivers that were not. Well, Drake London was hurt, so we'll see. Hopefully he's good to go this week. But I'm with you. I'm with you. I just think more efficiency on the passing is what we're hoping for. And let's just hope he steps in there and directs the football to the right guys.
Yep.
Right.
I'm with you on that.
That'll be huge. So I don't know that it'll be even a super flex starter, Heineke, in this offense. But again, we just care about getting the ball to the skill guys. So feel a little better about them right now.
Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers wide receivers. This one doesn't feel good either because Jordan Love has been difficult trying to.
It feels great for you.
I don't.
This is your victory lap opportunity.
I know, but I'm sitting here next to one of my best friends.
It's early, but so far you got a major W on this
Mike,
one. I'll give it to you.
It's halfway through the season.
I mean, well, okay, Watson missed a month, but I mean, he's played 3 full games.
Yeah, fair enough.
But again, I guess maybe it's just manifesting it. Wishful thinking.
I know.
I'm hoping Watson has a second half like he did last year, and then I'll feel much better about this. But
you can't start either of these guys, can you?
What?
You can't start either of these guys confidently, can you?
Well, I'll say this. I meant to ask this at the beginning of the show because I want to tip it off because now it's obvious, but. Who leads the NFL in end zone targets this season? And to be clear, he is 12. No one else in the NFL is more than 10.
12. Romeo Dobbs.
Yeah.
Really?
Leads the NFL in end zone targets. And actually, Watson leads the NFL in end zone targets since his full return. Actually, since he returned. So including that limited game and including the bye week.
He's
leading the NFL in end zone targets. The problem is they're like 10 feet above his head, right? They're just, he's missing them. I was watching that closely last week, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And just Love kept looking. Here's Watson in the end zone and just missing him high. Like he couldn't get to it. So
inaccurate, especially downfield.
He's been bad.
Especially downfield.
I didn't think he'd be this bad.
I know you didn't.
No, I didn't. I didn't. Again, part of my case in the offseason was Aaron Rodgers didn't exactly have a good year last year.
No, that is fair.
And Watson was still really productive. And they are trying to get the ball to Watson. I mean, he had 8 targets last week. That matched a career high.
I think
so. They're trying to get it to him. It just hasn't been good so far.
I'm not trying to say this as like slander towards Jordan Love, but I think what you just said is a good point to the fact that like sometimes we watch these superstars struggle. And even a struggling superstar is better than like an average player at the position sometimes. Like Aaron Rodgers looked tough last year. It was not ideal for him. But now without Aaron Rodgers, this Packers offense looks way different.
Yeah, by the way, another part of the problem is, check this out. Since Watson came back, he has the most targets and catches on the team among the receivers. Sure. Romeo Dobbs has the most touchdowns among the receivers. Jaden Reed has the most fantasy points among the receivers, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
but he's in the middle on everything. And So it's just not happening. And by the way, Dobbs hasn't had a top 30 since week 4. Had a really 9 targets last week, but only had 18 yards, scored a touchdown. To your point, like Watson, I think is still the most startable because he's had the most volume.
And the best player, I think, out of those.
And the best player, yeah. Dobbs is tough to trust, I would say.
I'm with you on that one. I still don't want to start, if I can help it, Christian Watson against the Rams because, Mike, you actually started this whole thing off by speaking into existence the Rams' awesome defense this year.
Yeah.
You gave them that motivation.
Well, they've
really
Rams,
come back down to earth.
Aside of, so Arizona, they crushed them. They had a huge defensive game. Other than that, they have the 6th worst defensive EPA.
Do they? All right, so maybe you were right all along.
We'll see. I mean, they've been up and down for sure. They're not the, we'll say, dumpster fire that they could have been based on what they had on paper. So great coaching job there. But yeah, they are definitely starting to be exposed to some extent.
Are you starting either one of these running backs?
I'm still starting Aaron Jones.
I'm starting Aaron Jones. Yeah.
You want to sound like you were passionate about that case.
He trended back up in terms of snaps a little bit last week. 48% of the snaps. The production wasn't great.
I can't believe you just said that. Like the idea
trended
that
up to 48% of snaps.
Trending up to 48% of snaps is where we're starting. Can I just say this really quickly? Last 3 games, 1.9, 7.2, 6.6.
Yeah,
I don't understand the confidence. Like, I get that we've got to start him because he's better than a lot of the guys. I just don't feel confident in starting Aaron Jones, period.
Yeah, I mean,
the entire offense. I mean, I think it's emblematic of where things are at right now with Green Bay.
We're still starting him as running back 12 this week.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about these teams that are like, in the bottom 10 or so of the NFL, maybe bottom 12 even, where you could see them sinking towards the bottom 5. And I've thought about, as I think about teams that are in that category, I always think not just about like what their pathway forward is, but also like how do you undo some of the errors in the first place. There are teams where it's it's a clean, easy way out. Like if you're Washington and you need a new quarterback this offseason in your estimation, like either moving a 5th round pick to the bench or waiving him, which I don't think you'd waive Sam Howell. You could trade him. Like that's easy to do. Right? Like Green Bay untangling this web right now is maybe pivoting off of the guy that you took in the 1st round when you still had Aaron Rodgers. By the way, in like a part of his prime, just before he won back-to-back MVP seasons. What a complicated web Green Bay has facing them this offseason if things continue like they have so far.
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, if this continues, they have to make a change.
Have to.
They just
have to. Yep.
And they're, I thought the Rasul Douglas trade was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
He's a starter, solid player. And, are they packing it in a little bit?
Packing it in.
Well done, Mike.
They want to get some younger guys in there.
What if they made that Jonathan Taylor trade back in the day?
What?
Stop
Remember that Jonathan Taylor offer that they reportedly pursued? Would have been interesting, huh?
Yeah. I still wonder about that. Was A.J. Dillon going the other way? Something like that. Speaking of which, second-round pick. They have a decision on their hands with him, too, and they extended Aaron Jones. And
do they have a decision with A.J. Dillon?
He's going to be a free agent after this year.
Yeah, I mean, but do you keep him and move on from 29-year-old Aaron Jones, or do you just blow up the running back position?
Also a free agent this offseason, Aaron Jones.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
So was that
after he redid his deal this offseason and chopped off the final year, which would be next year. So anyways, just to put ranks to what we talked about, RB 16 for Aaron Jones for me, 18 for both of you. I'm sorry, Mike, you're at 16 as well. And then outside the top 30 for A.J. Dillon for all 3 of us.
Yeah, and by the way, part of that is the similar discussion to quarterbacks, which is you get to a point where you're like, well, not so great anymore. 4 teams on a bye as well. Yep. Jones is the next best guy.
Totally.
And Matt LaFleur is obviously going to try to maximize him best he can.
Yep. Do we want to do Jordan Addison again, or who was it that offered up Jordan Addison in this conversation out of the 3 of us?
That's a great question.
I don't know. I think he was just part of the.
Daniel's you.
He was part of
the
quarterback.
So do you have any updated thoughts from the Joshua Dobbs trade?
So here's the thing. Part of me I was going to say this. Jordan Addison over the last 2 weeks is wide receiver what?
7?
Wide receiver 2.
Wow.
Second best wide receiver in the game. More fantasy points over the last 2 weeks than a guy named Tyreek Hill. I don't know if you ever heard of Tyreek Hill.
I should have known that because he's my guy. I should know this about my guy.
So we're going to take a guy that is wide receiver 2 over the last 2 weeks, and he's ranked outside our top 30 of the position. And I just wanted to talk about why, because even though obviously you're going to get Jaron Hall, there's still a thought process where it's like, that's it. That's it. The only way that you go from a guy who has been that good, seen that much volume, to all of a sudden, now we're saying he's unstartable because of the quarterback position.
Pretty close,
Yeah, we talked about this earlier, but I mean, we thought Garrett Wilson could be a top 5 guy, and he's delivering around 30th and wide receiver with
Zach Wilson.
And it's
under
really
center.
because of the quarterback
the
situation.
number 2 pick in the draft 3 years ago under center.
So even though you had Jordan Addison go off for 2 straight weeks, it does not mean that he is a lineup lock for your lineup this week because of the quarterback change.
I think in the playbook I wrote that I still feel like there's no way you're benching him.
Yep.
But
he's a flex play.
It's tough. Yeah. I mean, it's still a tricky one. I think he's a flex, but I think you'd probably be hard pressed to bench him.
Just love it. Just if you had told someone a year ago that Josh Dobbs was going to come in and save the Vikings season,
oh my gosh,
bring that passing game back to life.
I kind of hope he
could have made some serious money.
I kind of hope he's like, we're going to get them tweets from Field Yates around what time would it be? Like 2:15, 2:30. Josh Dobbs is replacing Jaron Hall in the second half. After halftime.
Don't want that.
We need
really tamp
we do
down
want that.
on-
Well, technically, I do want that. Yeah.
I mean, really what we want is Hall to just be a gem find and use a home run and saves the season for them. But
we've really tamped down the tweeting on Sundays. It's just
me too.
At some point, we're going to do a show
nonstop.
just on what has changed in the football media over the past
so much.
couple of years.
Hey, which one would you start this week, Field? Would you start Jordan Addison or would you start DJ Moore?
Well, my rankings have DJ Moore slightly ahead of Jordan Addison, but I am quite a bit behind Mike Clay with DJ Moore. Now, Moore has actually been fine with Tyson Bagent under center.
Mike's at wide receiver 19.
What are you?
Wide receiver 31.
Yeah, so he's been fine. Like DJ Moore obviously had that one massive game, the 48-point effort. I had a stat here.
He had
on
2
DJ.
games back-to-back in which he was top 5. He's been outside the top 30 since then.
Top 30, yeah. So he's got 10+ fantasy points in 6 of his 9 games this season. But as Mike told us, like was sort of referencing earlier with Josh Downs, is that like solid is not something like it's something you're looking for in certain players. You're not looking for solid from DJ Moore, right? You're looking for lock it in fantasy starter. So just have some concerns about this Bears offense facing a more difficult matchup than the Chargers, because basically every matchup is more difficult than the Chargers, regardless of who you are playing. So I've got him as wide receiver 28. I just feel like the offense by the eye test is just dramatically, even when Justin Fields was as inconsistent as he was at the beginning of the year, the passing game just strikes a lot less potency, or has a lot less potency with Tyson Bagent under center. Like, that's my hot take of the day right there.
Yeah,
how's that?
I guess I'm just still chasing volume here. Still a huge target share. He's 22 targets in the last 3 games, despite the production being down at least 4 catches in every game. And the Saints are mid-pack against receivers, so I'm not super worried about that. And I'm just buying into Talon and Bagent being a little better and them continuing to throw him a ton of football. So it really comes down to that. But again, he's in that. I have him kind of leading a big tier of receivers in that area. So fair enough. I mean,
Tyson Bagent averaging less than 200 passing yards per game, has 1 passing touchdown in both of his 2 starts combined.
Yeah.
So I'm with Field on this one, because this is not a DJ Moore thing. I think DJ Moore is a really good wide receiver, but with this offense, they have been so. I mentioned this on the score report. They have just been so aggressively mediocre across the board,
Except for that one game against Washington.
except that one game.
Mac Clay fodder right there. I mean, Mac Jones fodder from Mike Clay.
Mac Clay.
Mac Clay. If he balls out this Sunday, I will call him Mac Clay.
Matt Clay.
Yes.
That's what it's going to be.
That's it.
But Washington defense, the gift that keeps on giving.
That's right. It has so far. We'll see. I'm very curious to see what happens with Washington now. They're going to step it up now, or are they going to fall apart now?
I don't
And
think
Casey
so.
Tuhill's going to step it up this
gonna
weekend for
crush
you.
it.
Watch him
Let's
have
go.
3 sacks and win
F.A.
Defensive
Obama.
Player of the Week.
How
Yeah,
amazing would that be?
Be so typical football right there. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, now it's time for AI-generated fantasy insights built with IBM Watson. We're talking risky business here this week, guys. If you were looking at a Panthers running back that you want to play, Miles Sanders was the guy coming into the season. We had such high hopes for him, and now it looks like Chuba Hubbard has taken over. Risky business starting Miles Sanders this week, Field?
It is the riskiest business in all of fantasy football. Okay. Yeah, if you like 0 points, then sure, it's a good idea. He had 2 carries for 0 yards last week.
You know who had more carries than him last week?
Laviska Shenault.
No, he was inactive, but he was close. Okay. Yeah, he was. He was only 2 behind. Raheem Blackshear,
Of course.
their third running back, actually had more carries. than Sanders.
Unbelievable. So it's actually kind of amazing that we still have him inside our top 50 for this week.
Yeah, I mean, he can't be in your lineups.
He can't be in lineups. Can't do it. And I think there's okay value with Chuba Hubbard, but I still think that you are counting on a touchdown, which do you count on a touchdown for an offense that up until last week? Wait, you know what? They've been a little bit better. Like the game script certainly was playing into their favor, throwing the football a lot. I don't really know. Like, I'm so glad they got a win. I hate when teams are winless in the NFL, But like, do we really feel like the offense turned it around last week when they scored 15 points?
No,
No.
we don't. But I will say this. They're playing the Colts, and the Colts have allowed the second most touchdowns to running back so far
Really?
this season.
Interesting.
And the fifth most fantasy points. So maybe there's some sleeper appeal here for Hubbard. The reason, despite the fact that he played 2/3 of the snaps at 15 carries and 2 targets last week, I mean, his efficiency was not good, first of all.
Yes.
But also, they paid Miles Sanders a lot of money, and I think that we should play this safe in a way that's like they're going to give Sanders another look.
You think so?
Like, I think he will play more than 10 to 12 snaps.
Do you think it happens before they lose again?
No.
I think it could happen this week. And again, if Hubbard played well last week, it might be a different conversation, but he had 28 yards and 15 carries. So it wasn't exactly lighting it up. So with the amount you paid Sanders, it would not surprise me if he plays more. Like,
then again, it's the Panthers.
Split.
I'm not sure that any organization over the past 3 years has made their mind and then changed their mind more. I guess other than the Raiders, right? I mean,
that's fair.
Totally fair. I just, I don't think Hubbard has done anything to kind of cement his status.
Fair.
And I think we have to
that's
inject
good.
some of that risk with Hubbard into our ranking. That's why he's not, look, if we, in this matchup, if we thought Hubbard was a good player at a secure role as a number one, was going to see 15 to 20 touches against this defense.
top 15.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have him, 26 to 30th. So I think that's the only reason he's not higher.
How many fantasy points do you think Miles Sanders has over the last 3 games combined?
Well, he missed the ones he's played.
3 games.
9.8, because it's really the last 2 games combined because
right.
he had 0 last night.
He has 5.9. 5.9 over 3 games. He's averaging less than 2 fantasy points per game.
Running behind that Eagles O-line was pretty beneficial.
Thank you, Mike. I said that.
Well, yeah, we talked about that in the offseason.
More yards before first contact than any other
Not a
player
good pass
coming into the
catcher.
league. That what you guys do with that offensive line, and we've seen it again with DeAndre Swift and what you guys are doing for the Eagles. Like this did not work out the same way.
And they did try. He had a ton of targets, ton of carries out of the gate.
Yeah,
it just hasn't worked. Yeah.
Note to self. Rashad Penny is going to have a 2 to 3 game sample size later this season where he balls out.
He's going to crush
It's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, just weird stuff happens in fantasy all the time.
Yep.
Well,
that right there, I got to write that one down.
Kenny Gainwell, remember, no carries after the fumble last week inside the 10. So who knows?
You're telling me there's a chance.
Interesting.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We love you guys. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. You have earned it. Come back tomorrow. Field and I are talking Thursday night football. We're doing the first part of our Week 9 preview.
Yeah.
No Mike Clay. He'll be back on Friday with our friend Stefania, so come back. It'll
Mac
just be
Clay.
Field and I. That's right.
Mac Clay.
Mac Clay. We love you guys. We'll see you. Peace. That wasn't bad.
Do you have any Will Levis thoughts you want to share before the show tomorrow?
I have him like 15th in my ranking. So let's go.
More DeAndre Hopkins.
Over 1.5 passing touchdowns. What do you got? Big plus money on that.
Big plus money?
Yeah.
I'll take it if it's big plus
It's
money,
like
Mike.
plus 164. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'll take
Yeah,
that.
it's
actually.
80 eggs.